Hi, I'm Matteo, a Microsoft MVP for Azure DevOps. Today we'll take a look at pipelines as code, but before we get into the details, let's take a step back to understand how we got to this point and why this is important. Git was a massive revolution for our industry. It changed literally everything. Thanks to Git, we changed our approach to version control. We started embracing concepts like social coding, open source and inner source, and we even create content today with it via Markdown and one of the many static site generators out there. So it is clear that the new world is as code. Infrastructure as code has been around for a while, configuration as code has been around for a while as well, and it's now pipelines as code that's all the rage. But how is the industry getting along? Because all of our favorite stacks are moving there, it's clear that everyone is going towards the pipelines as code direction. But is it something actually new? Well, not really. Cruise control natively supported them, and it was 2001. A little ahead of times, I reckon, but still, the idea was out there. It was just a little bit early, if you like, for that. Fast forward to today, Azure DevOps, GitHub, Jenkins, Go CI/CD, Concourse, you name it. All of our favorite stacks are moving there now. And that's because we're moving away from an approach that used to be GUI first towards an approach that's code first. So everything goes around code. As expected, Azure Pipelines fully supports them. It's the same engine with different entry points. If you start looking at an existing classic build or release definition, in the logs, you will spot that they're just YAML files that have been referred and called as part of the steps. So it's literally just a different way of consuming the same engine. Some features are different though. The pipeline as code experience has newer or different features, which we will see later on. This is an example of a traditional template that's usually used as a starting point when building full .NET Framework applications. You have a number of tasks like use Nugget 4.4.1 or Nugget Restore, Visual Studio Build and so on that run as part of an agent job on a certain agent linked to a certain repository. This is the equivalent in a YAML file. So you will see that you have an equivalence in the tasks, and that's fairly straightforward. And you also have the same variables and the same triggers exposed by the YAML file. The only visible difference here is that you don't have an explicit source for the repository and the branch, because the YAML file actually lives in a repository and in a branch. So you don't really need that. But at the same time, it's not that difficult and it's not that impossible to move from one to the other. But should I migrate today? No. The answer is clear no. Migration is not required. The engine is still there. All the features are still there, so there is no need of moving away from one to the other. There might be reasons why you want to move, and it might be because you want to take advantage of certain features, but at the same time, it's not something that's going to go away anytime soon. What happens to releases? That's the usual questions that I get, because especially in the documentation, you will see that it's always about build definitions. Well, releases become as code as well. So the pipelines are unified. In pipelines as code, you have the engine, the same engine, that runs either build or deployment jobs. So you just have a different keyword that you use to identify whether you're running a build or you're running a release. And support is very wide because the tools aren't changing. So all the steps, all the tasks, all the extensions installed from the marketplace, they're all still fully working and supported both in classic build and releases or the YAML files. As of today, for release in particular, VMs, platform as a service, and containers are fully supported. So you really don't have any problem in moving away from one to the other. But at the same time, you should only do so if you need it. So let's take a look at how to move from a classic set of pipelines to a full YAML CI/CD experience. So this is how your Azure Pipelines Hub looks like after enabling the multi-stage pipelines feature flag in your Azure DevOps organization. Gun is the build link, replaced by pipelines. The releases link is still there for the classic UI-based release experience, and environments will see what this is about in a few minutes. Creating a new pipeline is very straightforward. Click on the new pipeline button, tell Azure Pipelines where your code is, where's the repo, and then you will be greeted with three options. Some predefined template based on the language the system recognizes, an existing pipeline file to import if it's already out there and it's in your repository, or a startup pipeline to start from scratch. If you use that, you can see that it's just a text file. It's nothing else. But at the same time, it's not too daunting, because the moment you want to start adding more tasks, then you can use the assistant here, which is going to give you exactly the same experience as the classic UI-based pipeline designer, but directly into the YAML file. So let's say that I want to run an ARM template deployment. I can click on it and I will be greeted with exactly the same options that I would get into the UI of the classic designer. What if I want to move a classic designer file into the YAML experience? Well, it's fairly straightforward at the end of the day, especially if you have a streamlined set of tasks. So this is a build definition that I use for this demo, and if I open it, I can see that on top of the usual options that I have, I can also export the YAML file behind the UI. This is true for both build and release, enabling you to make a quick lift and shift migration easily. So if you open the file, you can just take it and copy it. This runs a number of tasks. It's fairly simple, but at the same time is not the simplest build definition that you can find around, and is not the usual set of templates that you see around. So it runs Gradle on 3 different services that make my application. Then it also copies files across and publishes 2 sets of artifacts. This is fairly simple, but at the same time, it gives you an idea of what it takes to move away. Creating a new YAML pipeline, then it gets very easy, because from your existing files, you can just create a new pipeline, use the repo that you're interested in, pick up a startup pipeline, and using that, you just need to replace everything except the trigger. If you paste this here as it is, the only change you need to make is to replace the name of the agent pool to a different syntax. In this case, we need to change the property to VM image, and we need to change it to the name of the VM that's in use. It's just a different parameter, and it's actually exposed in the UI designer as well, but that's how the YAML pipelines work. So we replace these with BS 2017-Win 2016. This is all you need to get started. It's exactly the same pipeline. It's exactly the same set of tasks that will run, and it will be going there as it is. So let's save it and run it. So now the pipeline is green. That would be perfect, but in reality, what we want is to have a real solid pipeline that we can use in production, and not just a lift and shift as it is. This specific pipeline has only got one implicit job and one implicit stage, so it's not really ready to have a release stage as well. Let's fix that. So I can open up the pipeline, and by going into the editing mode, I go straight to the file. First thing that I need to do is to actually define a number of stages. So let's start with the stages. A stage is either a build or deployment stage, effectively. So I can specify my stage that I call build. And then inside the stage, I need to add one or more jobs. In this case, I only need one for my CI. So I will do exactly that. After that, what I need to do is just perform some formatting. So I can pick up my existing steps with everything that's underneath and bring it under my jobs. Once it's in my CI job, I just need to fix this inline issue, and then I will be done. By doing that, I'm making sure that I encapsulate my CI job within a list of other jobs. I might have others like testing or doing external stuff, And then these jobs will run as part of a stage. You can have multiple stages within a pipeline, like the release stage that we'll be adding right now. So if we want to do release on this environment, first of all, let me save this. So it's going to kick in the build and it's going to run. In the meanwhile, I'll explain you about the environments. All this does is encapsulating those steps. Once you want to add the release, what you need to have is at least an environment. An environment is nothing else than a collection of resources that you can have within your release target. So in this case, out of the box, it can be a Kubernetes namespace or it can be a number of virtual machines, but you can also have a different environment that you can fill in at will and at runtime. Let's say that you want to add some virtual machines. The virtual machines will be either Windows or Linux, and let's call this environment just for the demo. It can be Windows or Linux VM. Once you decide what type of operating system you have, you just run this registration script in your server, and that would be it. It will be automatically configuring the agent, and it will be running everything within the agent. That's all it takes, and I already created an environment for my production release. Now the pipeline is green. Obviously, if we were to do this in a real world environment, we will not be having just a single implicit job and a single implicit stage. So it's time that we make this pipeline a little bit more robust and resilient so that we can use it in a real world situation. First thing that we need to do is to replace the publishing steps over here so that they use the new versions of these tasks. It's a slightly different task that plays better with the pipelines. So what I can do is just stick it at the bottom and search for it. Publish pipeline artifacts. They can be configured exactly the same way as the existing one. So no change really. This will be still drop. I'll be adding it at the bottom. And I will be doing the same with the other one. Which is going to be called deployment. Once done, I can cut this, replace the other two tasks, and format them as usual. Now the next step would be adding the deployment stage. So we can go at the bottom and start adding a new stage. That's going to be a deployment. This stage will have some jobs. And the first one will be targeting a deployment. So the deployment is going to go to production, so call it production, and then I'll specify the details of the environment that I'm going to use. So environment, and then I can specify the properties like name, the resource type, which is going to be virtual machines, and the tags that I'm going to use. I just added a tag called MRP into my VM. After that, I need to specify the strategy. The strategy is a way that you can define jobs to run against a target. It could be run once, like in the example that I use in a moment. It can be a matrix, it can be run in parallel, it can be different strategies at all. So it's just a way that the jobs are going to be distributed. In this case, I'm going to go straight with run once. After that, it's going to be a deployment stage directly, because I'm not going to run any pre-deploy steps, and then the steps that I'm interested in. On the steps over here, what I need to add is two steps that actually download and consume the pipeline, as in the real world, I might not be running this pipeline within the same file. In this case, it's a bit unnecessary, but I will just do it for the demo to show how to do it in case you have separate pipelines that will run. So it's going to be download pipeline artifact twice, and it's going to be from a specific run in this case. So I'm going to specify the project that I'm interested in. which is parts unlimited MRP. The build pipeline that I'm interested in, again, it's the same one, so this is unnecessary, but it's just to show what the process would be like if you have a separate stage that runs in a different file. And over here, I'll just pick up the latest version from the definition I'm interested in. That's all I have to do. I just need to specify what's the artifact name that I want. And given that I never run that, I don't have it, but it's going to be drop. And I can copy this and paste it again, just to have the second one that's going to pick up the deployment artifacts. From there onwards, I just need to add an extra step. That's going to be running my bash script that I use. So just run a bash script. This script is going to be within the artifact. It comes from the deployment one. So it is like this. Then it's going to be contained in a folder called deploy. And the file is called deploy mrp app.sh. Now I'm not making this up, but oops. Actually, I am not making this up. I'm going to show you just because I remember that. So this would be my list of steps for the deployment. And while I run it, I'll show you where this path comes from. So this is running now. And within my pipeline, I created two sets of artifacts. This is from the old one, but it's the same. The deployment artifact will have a deploy path, folder that contains my deploy underscore mrp underscore app.sh. So now my pipeline is running, and it's going to run two stages, not just one. The first stage is the build with a CI stage, and the second one will be a deployment stage targeting production. Now the release is green as well. If we had a list of jobs longer than 2, then we would have had all of them listed here, but otherwise we can either go straight in the deployment job from here, and you can see that everything is green, or by environment over here. That's an interesting way of viewing the same data from different point of views. Now let's see if the application was actually deployed correctly. Should be parts unlimited mrp dot North Europe dot com on port 9080/mrp. And it seems to be working. So this is what it takes to move from classic pipelines to full YAML CI/CD. Obviously, the demo is fairly simple and it's not a complex application running in a real production environment, but I hope that it gives you a flavor of what's required to move from one entry point to the other. Now that you are hopefully on board the new version of the pipelines, there are a few advanced features that are worth mentioning, which are exclusive to Pipelines as Code. The first one is container jobs. A container job is a job that runs within a container that's hosted by the agent. So in this example over here, my hosted agent running Ubuntu 16.04 is going to spin up a container, again Ubuntu 16.04 for convenience, and it's going to run some steps inside the container. And this is exactly what happens, where the container is immediately initialized. Everything happens within the container, including the code checkout, and then once the job is completed, the container is stopped. Another feature that I'm really in love with is templates. We can finally define build or release templates that can be consumed and populated at runtime. This means that we have facilities where we have a number of well-known steps that we can run at the same time on different target environments, or potentially with variables populated on the fly for your templates. This goes very well with loops, because we all wanted to run a for loop in a pipeline for ages, and now we finally can. So in this example over here, I have a template over here and a pipeline that I'm going to run. The template just has an array as input parameter, and then it runs a loop for every parameter in my param array, and what it does is running an echo as a script. The actual pipeline will refer to the template, and it passes those two parameters. The result is that those two command line scripts are generated on the fly, because there is a loop in there that does it for them. So there is no hard coding of number of steps or things like that. This comes in extremely handy where you have stuff that you want to parameterize and you want to pass through in a first in, first out basis. Also strategies. We talked about strategies. The matrix strategy is a permutation of agents and variables, and that's an extremely valuable feature to have, especially if you are in a product-based development. This is what a matrix looks like. In my case, I defined a simple matrix made of Ubuntu 16.04 and 18.04, Mac OS X, High Sierra, and Mojave, and then Windows Server 2016 and 2019. I specified the version of the image that I want to run, and for example, the version .NET Core that I'm interested in just for the demo. So what will happen is that, did it on purpose, one of the two versions of .NET Core will fail on a certain image, and this will be the result. So in my permutation, version 2.2.x of .NET Core fails for whatever reason, while version 3.1.x always works. And that again is just to show that you can run exactly the same build definition, exactly the same set of steps, but against a known matrix. So summarizing, those two systems can live together. They are just two entry points to the same engine, so they can coexist with no problem whatsoever. There is no migration required today. If you want to move away from one to the other, it is relatively easy. Each system has got different features. So if you go for the classic UI-based pipeline, you will have a GUI and you will have different features compared to the relative inconvenience of not having a GUI, but having like container jobs or matrices. They're just different features. So you can decide and choose what's the preferred approach for you based on your requirements. So thank you very much for watching this video. Feel free to get in touch if you have any question or if you want to discuss this more, and more to come in the future. Thank you.